All right, what is up, Utah fans? This is Joseph back with the Utah Utes Football Digest. And today we are going to talk about fall camp. You know, there's a ton of storylines as we head into fall camp. More specifically, though, we're going to take a look at all the different position groups for Utah, break them down as a group and as individual players, talk about what we're going to see at fall camp, what to watch for, any position battles, and just kind of the floor and ceiling of the room. If things go really well, why do they go well? If things go really poorly, why do they go really poorly? It should be a great time, should be a ton of fun. Before we dive in, please make sure you guys smash that like button. Also, comment down below. I want to know, you could say it for one position group or multiple position groups, but what do you think the floor is? What do you think the ceiling is, and why? You can agree or disagree with me. I want to know. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. The season's ramping up, and we put out a ton of Utah Utes football content. This is not a gymnastics channel. This is not a baseball channel. This is all about football. That's what we do. So make sure you guys subscribe if you're into that sort of thing. Outside of that, let's go ahead and dive in and take a look at the roster. All right, guys, and the first position group we're going to be looking at is going to be the quarterback room. And the quarterback room cannot be mentioned without the star, Cam Wham Bam, thank you ma'am, Rising. This guy is a playmaker, has led Utah to back-to-back Pac-12 championships in 2021 and 2022. Big time player. If you're a Utah fan and you don't know who Cam Rising is, I really don't know what to tell you. He has been the lifeblood of this offense for a long time. Now, unfortunately, in the Rose Bowl in 2022, in a very competitive game early on against Penn State, Cam Rising goes down with a horrific knee injury. Really rough go there. Now, the good thing about that is he missed all of last year because of the knee injury. So tons of downtime and a lot of time to recoup and get back to 100%. The bad part about that is it was a very serious knee injury that required him to miss basically a full season and 2 off seasons. So there are a lot of question marks about how close Cam Rising will be to 100%, and especially with his style of play where he's moving, he's cutting in and out, it could be, you know, something to keep an eye on. Now, the good news is he looked really good in the spring game, and my expectation is with that much downtime, he's got to be as close to 100% as you can guess. But overall, having Cam Rising perform at least 90% of what we've seen historically is going to be a huge factor for whether or not this Utah team has the success we expect in 2024. Now, the other thing to look at with the backup quarterback position is that battle there. Now, Cam Rising is going to have the starting role locked down, but, you know, it's almost always you see your backup quarterback get some playing time at some point during the season. I can't think of a season where that didn't happen at least a little bit. First guy is Sam Heward. Sam Heward is a transfer from Cal Poly. Originally a 5-star prospect that went to Washington before transferring out to Cal Poly when Michael Penix came in. Now, this guy was looked at as a guy with a ton of talent and a ton of upside. Obviously, if he went to Cal Poly, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, that probably didn't work out super well. But it's a really talented guy that has a lot of starting experience and a lot of snaps at the P4 or 5 level, but then also a lot of actual starts and full games being played at the FCS level. So I think he's a guy with a lot of upside and a very solid backup option. I don't think I would be too stressed if he needed to see some playing time. I think he could be a guy with a lot of upside down the line. The next guy to look at is going to be Isaac Wilson. Now, there is a rumor about some surgery, that sort of thing, but I do believe he's still going to be available to be that backup QB if he earns the job. In my opinion, I would prefer to see him redshirt this year and not have to see any playing time. But, you know, you get up to 4 games if you're a redshirt. So if he does need to see some playing time, that'd be cool, just hopefully not too much. He's a really talented player, looked awesome in the spring game. I did a spring game breakdown video if you guys want to check that out. super impressive, leading some awesome drives and making some awesome plays. Definitely in contention to be the backup quarterback. And then we've also got Brandon Rose. Brandon Rose is really a tale of two spring games. We've got one spring game where he looked awesome in 2022 or 2023. Then we've got this last spring game where he looked, less than what you'd want. He also was rumored to be the backup quarterback in 2023 before getting injured. So I think you got a ton of upside here with Brandon Rose. And overall with the QB room and Sam Heward, Isaac Wilson, and Brandon Rose, looks like a really talented group. And I think you're in a situation where whoever does win that backup job is probably a very good backup option. So that's the quarterback room. Let me know what you guys think. All right, and the next group we're going to talk about is going to be the running back room for Utah. Now, Utah lost Jaquindon Jackson this year to Arkansas. Jaquindon Jackson was a super talented running back, and there's really no getting around the fact that his loss will be felt. He's very hard to replace, and in my opinion, one of the best running backs in the country, but he's no longer a Ute, so we're not going to talk about him much today. Who we will talk about, though, are some of the guys that could be the starter and could lock down that main starting role. So one guy that a lot of people have been talking about is Anthony Woods. Now, Anthony Woods is a transfer from Idaho, again, an FCS player, but looked really good and had a lot of hope to be the guy for Utah this year. The rumor is with him that he is out for the year. It has not been officially announced, but the rumors I'm hearing pretty strongly in Utah football circles are quite rampant. So I'm going to go ahead and imagine he's out for the year. Now, there's Mekhi Bernard. Mekhi Bernard is the guy at running back for Utah right now. He is a very versatile weapon, especially as a receiving back. You get him a little play-action flat route and just dump it off to him, let him run it up for a first down. That's what he specializes in. Very well-rounded overall player. Don't get me wrong, he can run between the tackles and be a solid every down back, but I think, in my opinion, his specialty really is being a very good receiving back. Don't forget that wheel route against Ohio State a couple years ago where he catches that in the corner of the end zone. Very, very impressive. Then you've got a guy like, but also with Mekhi Bernard, he's coming off a pretty serious injury where he missed most of the last year. So, how close to 100% does he really look? And just going off that, you guys are going to see as we do this full roster breakdown, there are a lot of players that are coming off serious injuries, and how they bounce back will be a huge factor on this season. The next guy is Jalen Glover, and I think even me, as I was going through the roster, Jalen Glover has kind of been the forgotten running back in this room. I was looking at the stats, and Jalen Glover averaged 4.1 yards per carry on 562 yards of rushing. That is a very impressive stat line in an offense where the quarterback room was dreadful, and he was going against loaded boxes almost every play. I think everyone counting out Jalen Glover, it seems a little weird. That is a good stat line, 4.1 yards a carry on 562 yards, and I think he's going to come out hungry and ready to make some serious plays to prove a lot of the doubters wrong. Now, I do think the eye test would tell you that you'd like to see a little more from Jalen Glover, but he's a hardworking guy, 4-star running back coming out of high school, and a guy that I'm sure is going to look to prove all the doubters wrong. All right, and we've got Mike Mitchell up next. Now, Mike Mitchell is a guy that coming out of high school was a 4-star prospect as well. Really impressive player. And for recruiting breakdowns, I always break down the recruits' tape, and Mike Mitchell had some of the best tape out of anyone I've seen in a long time. I'd put it up there as the best tape, if I'm being honest with you guys. I think he's super impressive, and he's big, he's physical, he's strong. He's a guy that could definitely carve out a role as one of the main running backs in this room. Now, it's a lot of competition in this room, but he could do it. And if there's anyone outside of Mekhi Bernard and Jalen Glover that's going to do it, my money's probably on him. And the rumor mill seems to think that he's going to have a very good year this year. We've also got Dejon Stanley. Now, Dejon Stanley, another 4-star prospect. Really athletic, saw some playing time last year, and has that breakaway speed. I think College Football 25 had his rating for speeds is like 97, 98. Super fast player, super talented guy. Now, he did look slim last year, right? He looked tall, long, and kind of lanky last year, just being real about it. But with the offseason, hopefully he's put on a little bit of weight. And I really do think at the end of the day, no matter what, he's going to get some time in this running back room, whether it's due to injury or due to him earning a role. We will eventually see him start to earn a place in this at the table. So it looks like a really great room. We've also got guys like John Randall behind him, another 4-star guy that could be a breakout. Overall, basically what we got in this running back room is no clear star with a ton of talent, right? A ton of talent, and someone should break out. The real question is, who's going to be the guy that breaks out? That's the running back room for you. All right, guys, and the next position group we are going to be talking about is going to be the wide receiver room. Now, the wide receiver room is probably the deepest room on this team. It is, Utah's had their struggles at wide receiver, and it really does feel like they said, hey, we are going to throw asset after asset after asset multiple years in a row at this wide receiver room and just give ourselves the absolute highest chance that we get some playmakers out of this room. It really does feel that way, and I think you guys will feel similarly as we break down the room. The first guy is Dorian Singer. Now, Dorian Singer is a guy that went for 1,100 yards and 6 touchdowns 2 years ago with Arizona, and that was in a crowded wide receiver room. So for him to pull off those kind of stats is super impressive. Now, last year he was at USC and got very little playing time, and the numbers were not impressive at all. So him coming to Utah this year is a really important opportunity for him to take that next step and look like an awesome number one. Now, Cam Rising and Dorian Singer looked really good in the spring game, and I think everyone, including me, feels that it is very likely that Dorian Singer will be the number one receiver and will be a star this year. I'd be very surprised if he's not. The next guy up is going to be Damian Alford. Now, Damian Alford is a big, physical, strong receiver from Syracuse. And this is another guy with proven P4 talent. He looked really good at Syracuse last year. Supposedly, maybe some off-the-field issues, something like that. He didn't work out at Syracuse, but a guy that put up numbers at Syracuse, which is a P4 school. And don't forget, the talent around him at Syracuse isn't at the level Utah is, and so he's going to have a better roster around him to give him more openings. Super exciting talent here in Damian Alford. Big physical guy, catch screens, go downfield, win jump balls. Should be a really cool weapon for Cam Rising and Andy Ludwig in this offense. Then we've got Money Parks, and I think he's a guy that people have not talked about for a while. As talented as he is, remember at the end of 2022 in that USC game when he just started going off, and other games towards the end of the year, he really started going off. But then, last year we had a rough QB room, and he really, as much as he had that one giant play to start off the year where he scored a touchdown, throughout the rest of the year, he really wasn't able to get it going, but I'd probably blame most of that on the QB room. But when you factor in the fact that he's going to have more receiver talent around him than he ever has, and he's going to get ideal matchups, because I think when you look at that group, right, you got Dorian Singer, you got Damian Alford, and then you got Money Parks. Money Parks is probably getting the worst corner covering him. And with his speed and his, ability to make plays, I think we could see a huge season from him. But that's not it. I think those are the three clear starters, but we're going to see other guys rotate in. Guys like Munir McClain, a proven guy at Utah that seems to just get better every year. I would not be shocked at all if he really starts to steal some starting reps. We've also got Tayshawn Lyons. This is a guy from Washington, 4-star prospect coming in. Redshirt year, and now he's coming over to Utah. Then we've got guys like Mekhi Pittman, Dadrian Zipper, and many more that are all guys that could have breakout years. A ton of depth in this room, and this is probably the deepest wide receiver room I can remember for Utah in a very long time. I'd love to hear what you guys think, though. That's the wide receiver room. All right, guys, and now we are going to be talking about the tight end room. The first guy to look at is the man, Brant Kuithe. A couple little stats about Brant Kuithe. 3-time All Pac-12 selection with significant stats. 1,882 receiving yards and 142 receptions. That's not even counting some of the rushing yards he has. This is a bona fide playmaker, and outside of Cam Rising, the guy that will have the biggest impact on this offense that is returning this year. Again, just like Cam Rising, he had a significant injury. It was a serious injury that kept him out for a full year. almost a full 2 years of Brant Kuithe. But he is a playmaker and a guy that I would expect to really bounce back and look really good. Again, him being close to 100% is important though, but even at 80%, Brant Kuithe will be a weapon. And I also want to bring up, in that 2022 year, when Dalton Kincaid, who you can see the poster behind me, Dalton Kincaid, huge playmaker, first round pick for Utah at tight end. The thing is though, before Brant got injured 4 games in, Brant was the guy. Brant was talked about as one of the best tight ends in the country. Then he goes down, Dalton Kincaid goes off and becomes a superstar. So don't forget, this was the guy that had Dalton Kincaid kind of living in his shadow. I'd say it was a 1A, 1B, but still, Brant was the 1A. And if he can get close to that full 100% that he could do, we're talking about one of the best, if not the best, tight ends in the country. And anyone not mentioning Brant Kuithe in those conversations is out of their mind. Next up, we've got Carson Ryan. Now, Carson Ryan is coming in from UCLA, and he is one of the highest graded tight ends over the past 2 years. And again, he was playing at the P4 level. Super impressive player, but not a ton of receiving yards. As much as he is a really good player, I don't think he's been utilized to his full potential. I think him and Andy Ludwig are going to make a really deadly pair, and I expect to see him be one of the better tight ends in the Big 12 this year. If not, if all things go well, Utah can use 2-3 tight ends to a really high level. I could see it at the ceiling for this guy being one of the better tight ends in the country, not just the Big 12. Then next, we've got Landon King. Landon King is a guy that had 3 touchdowns last year, and really a lot of his production came towards the end of the year when he really started to get the ball rolling. He's a transfer from Auburn and looks to be a deadly playmaker for Utah. Seriously impressive kid. I'm super excited to get him in here. At the tight end position, I think he's really got a ton of potential. The other cool thing about it is this room has a ton of depth. We've got guys like Mickey Sugaturaga, Caleb Lohner, Dallin Bentley, CJ Jacobson, Spencer Clegg, a ton of guys with a lot of time developing in this room, or a lot of actual proven talent. Mickey Sugaturaga didn't grade out well, but as a 4th tight end, he's a really good option. So that's the tight end room, and probably the deepest and highest potential room on this team. All right, the next group we're going to take a look at is going to be the offensive line, or the O block as we like to call it. And that room, the story really starts with the bookend tackles for Utah. So that's going to be sophomore Spencer Fano and redshirt freshman Caleb Lomu. Now this is a very talented group of bookend tackles. They're very young, but very talented. Now Caleb Lomu, I've heard really good things about him behind the scenes, but we're yet to see him actually start games. And he's going to be starting at left tackle, which is the most important position on the offensive line. I think we're going to see good things, but don't be surprised if we see some real swings up and down. Don't forget, not only is it a redshirt freshman starting, we're also talking about a position where you're going to go against the best pass rushers in the country and have to hold your own one-on-one. So hopefully he can hold up and not have too many swings up and down. Hopefully we can see a solid year from him. Then Spencer Fano, a guy that had some real big swings up and down last year at left tackle, has been moved to right tackle. Still looks like a really good player, and a guy I was pretty critical of last year, but I do think that we're going to see a good next step. And I pulled some PFF numbers, and his trajectory for players of his age that had that many snaps is a very good trajectory, and I still believe that one day we'll see him be one of the best offensive tackles in the country. Now, the big question about the offensive line is going to come in the interior, right? Guard, center, guard. What are we going to see there? And it's a mix of some solid, salty vets. We've got junior Michael Mokafisi. We've got senior Johnny Maea, senior Falcon Kamatule. We've got also sophomore Solatoa Mauyea. Sorry about the names here. You guys know it's not always easy. And then we've got junior Jaron Kump. Now, this is a group of guys that some mix of those will be the starters. I think the mix is already figured out, but it's one of those things where we could see this change game to game, game in, game out. It could be a different group. Really solid group, and I think when you look at this group, they haven't graded out super well. None of them have looked terrible, but none of them have looked good. And they're all, guys that have seen some playing time, started some games, played a lot of snaps. But the real question is, hey, how good can you do game in and game out? Because offensive line is not about who the best player on your offensive line is. It's about who the worst player on your offensive line is. And we want this group to look average to slightly above average. And if they do, they are the biggest question mark on this team for me. And if they can look decent to even good, they could be a game changer for what we see this season and really help us take that next step. So that's the offensive line. All right, guys, next up, we are going to be looking at the defensive line for Utah. Let's go ahead and start that with the edge rushers. Now, in edge rushers, we lost Jonah Ellis, who came on as a superstar last year and was a third-round pick in the NFL draft. Now, I think he was even more valuable than a third-round pick, but either way, looked like an awesome player last year, and losing him will be a big hit. The good news is we still get Logan Fano coming back. And Logan Fano last year heading into, it was like week 4 or something where he actually got injured. But he was really looking like a breakout star. I believe he had 3.5 sacks before he got injured. And to have 3.5 sacks that early in the season feels like you're tracking for a special year. And I think even if we get 80% of what he was bringing last year, he's a good to very good edge rusher. Now, the thing is, he is coming off another very serious injury, and that's 2 very serious injuries in back-to-back years. We got to hope we get him close to 100%. But again, another guy that had a lot of downtime to rehab from the injury, but the injury is still a question. Good news is the room is super deep. We've got guys like Van Fillinger, and we've got guys like Connor O'Toole that are also going to be really good edge rushers for this room. Those are proven guys, started a lot of games and have graded pretty decently. Then we've got guys like John Henry Daly. We've got the Utah State transfer. A lot of depth in this room to where if injuries do happen, which you don't want them to happen, but they always seem to, we have guys that can come in and fill those spots. And having 3 good to very good edge rushers with 2 solid edge rushers behind them is a very good sign for the future. We've also got a ton of young guys that could step up and, be good third down situational pass rushers. Now at D tackle, so D tackle, we've got a very talented group. We've got Junior Tafuna. He's been talked about year after year as Utah's next breakout star. And I've been waiting to see it happen. I think he gets a little overhyped at times based on what he's actually done, but he is a solid player and has the potential to be one of the better D tackles in the country. Let's hope that this can be the year that he really breaks out for Utah. Sophomore Keanu Tanuvasa has really looked good, though. He had 2 sacks and 6 tackles for loss last year. And this is him getting lots of rotation where he's not playing every snap of every game. And I think we could really see a breakout year from this kid. And we've got Aliki Vimahi and Samodi Pepa, more guys that are explosive pass rushers at the defensive interior. I'm excited to see kind of how that group folds out, but another group that has a deep, talented room where someone is going to break out as a star. Utah does tend to ask their defensive interior to do a lot of the dirty work, but still a very talented group. And I think this defensive line overall is probably one of the best position groups on the team. That's the defensive line for Utah. Next up, we're going to be looking at the linebacker room for Utah. And the linebacker room starts with Karine Reed. Karine Reed is a veteran on this team and a guy that a lot of people thought was going to go pro last year. He decided to come back to Utah, and I think we're going to be expecting a very good year. He's a guy that can do everything. He can cover, he can rush the passer, he can stop the run. He's a super versatile player and a guy that I think Lander Barton, who we'll talk about next, gets a ton of the attention. But Karine Reed really is a special player, and I think we'll see an extremely good year. For him to come back this year, he's going to want to prove it and make sure he gets that big NFL check in this coming offseason. Now, Lander Barton is the other guy to talk about. Lander Barton, a.k.a. the neck, I think we've all seen that picture where his neck looks, like a mountain. Super impressive guy, a guy that really hits hard, rushes the passer. I think we'd like to see a little more consistency. I think a lot of Utah fans only look at the good from him, which there is a lot of good, but we would like to see a little more consistency. But I think if he could take that next step, he will be clearly one of the best linebackers in the Big 12 and could have that potential to be one of the better linebackers in the country. Now, the real question at linebacker is the third linebacker spot. Going into the year, we had Lavani Damuni as the third linebacker, but unfortunately, he went down with injury, and now Sione Fotu is going to be taking over that role. Now, Sione Fotu is going to take over the role, but I wouldn't be surprised if we saw some transition if Fotu doesn't work out. Potu does have a decent amount of reps from last year, but I don't think that spot is his in stone. If he looks good, I'm sure he'll keep it. If not, we have a lot of young guys that can come in and help fill that spot. That's the linebacker room for Utah. All right, guys, next up, we are going to be talking about the safety room for Utah. The safety room for Utah has seen quite a bit of turnover. Sione Vaki and Cole Bishop were two of the best players on this team and were both top 4-round draft picks in the NFL draft. Now, filling their shoes is going to be a tough challenge, but Utah does have a ton of depth and a ton of young talent that could potentially live up to the hype. It all starts with sophomore Te'o Johnson. Now, Te'o Johnson is a kid that came in as an athlete that was looked at to play wide receiver. And over time, he transitioned into a cornerback for Utah and a bit of safety. Now, what I see him playing this year is more of a hybrid role where he's in the box, he's over the top, he's playing some nickel here and there. I think they're going to use him more of as a defensive back weapon than a true safety, but he's a very talented guy and a guy that I would actually like see play more over the top safety, just so we know that we just have a very good player over the top and that position is kind of locked in. We've also got Nate Ritchie. Nate Ritchie, a big physical safety that had some flashes for Utah before he went on his mission. Now, since coming back from his mission, he got some playing time last year, but didn't look awesome. Just being honest about it. It wasn't great. I think you'd like to see a little more consistency from the guy, and hopefully with another offseason of training and learning the defense after the mission, he's a little more solid, a little more disciplined, and we'll see some better down in and down out play from him. We've also got Jonathan Hall. Jonathan Hall is a guy that a lot of people are talking about to be a guy that's already locked in one of these safety spots, but another guy, he can play over the top, he can play in the box. He's a sophomore. All three of these guys are sophomores, super talented, and we should see a really good mix of safeties. Behind them, we've got senior Alaki Gilman, we've got junior Rabbit Evans, and we've got freshman Jelani Davis, all very talented guys. So if for some reason any of the other safeties aren't working out, I think you got a solid depth group behind them that could come in and potentially fill that spot. That's the safety room for Utah. The final position for Utah we're going to talk about is going to be the cornerback room. And the cornerback room is going to start with none other than Zamiah Vaughn. Now, this is a guy that could have gone pro last year, and I believe would have been probably an early day 3, late day 2 pick. But let me be clear, Zamiah Vaughn is immensely talented and has a ton of potential. He just didn't quite live up to the hype last year, even though he did have a really good year. Zamiah Vaughn is a guy, if you're a Utah fan, you're going to want to know that name. He's number 5 on the defensive side of the ball, and he is a very, very talented cornerback. He is a guy that I expect to have an extremely good season. I already believe he's one of the best cornerbacks in the country, but I believe before the season's over, other Big 12 fans are going to know who this guy is and are going to dread playing him. He's going to really show up this year, try to earn that NFL check, and try to help Utah get to a college football playoff berth. Next, we've got Keenan Johnson. Now, this is a guy that I was super excited about. It was funny. During the transfer portal period, I'll go around and just look at the guys that are talking about that they've entered the portal and kind of just see what they would look like on Utah's defense and if they'd be worth looking at. I actually looked at Keenan Johnson and I said, wow, if we were to get this guy, I'm paraphrasing, but if we were to get this guy, it'd be a really big deal. He's a guy that had a 75-ish overall grade on PFF, and had it at outside corner for Georgia Tech, which means that he was doing P4 snaps at a very high level at outside corner for a team playing guys like Clemson, Florida State, a lot of really talented teams. And so I was super excited about him. And then Utah gets him, and I think he's been under the radar. He is going to fill the need we've had at cornerback 2 for a long time and be a very good corner. Now, is there a chance someone else could be the starter? Sure, but I expect very confidently that it's going to be Keenan Johnson, and he is going to really impress some Utah fans. And that duo of Keenan Johnson and Zamiah Vaughn is going to be a nightmare for Big 12 offenses. Then finally, we've got sophomore Smith Snowden. Now, this guy was a 4-star prospect, Utah Player of the Year. Going to be a really good nickel corner for us and could steal some reps at outside corner as well. But a guy that if you're a Utah fan, you want him on the field. He's got the body to be that slot corner, right? He's got the size profile to be really good at that. But overall, he should be a super impressive player, and I do think we'll see him see the field quite a bit this year. As depth pieces, we've got guys like Elijah Davis, Cameron Calhoun, CJ Blocker, Quamari Shemwell, all guys that have either been in this offense for a little while or are young to this team, been in this defense for a little while or are young to this team and look like they could have some immediate potential. One of the deeper groups in this locker room. Should be a great group. Really excited to see him. But that's the cornerback room for Utah. Very exciting group. So that was the Utah roster breakdown as we head into fall camp. You know, this is our second roster breakdown of the year, but I think this one, since we're so close to the season, should be a little more accurate, a little more impactful of what you're going to be watching for and what we're going to see as we head into the year. This is going to be a huge season for Utah, guys, and how these position battles work out, how the ceiling and floor of these different positions work out are going to be super important for how good Utah actually does this year. If you guys appreciate the video, please make sure you smash that like button. Also, comment down below. What do you think the floor and ceiling are for the different position groups? Which groups are concerns to you? Which groups do you think are going to be killers? I'll kind of give mine. I think quarterback with Cam Rising is going to be great. I think tight end is going to be great with the depth and the ceiling of that room. I think cornerback is going to be a super talented room. Linebacker, a ton of talent. So we've got a lot more good groups than we do have question marks, but we've got groups like offensive line and safety that do have some serious question marks. So I'd love to hear what you guys think. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. We put out a ton of Utah Utes football content. If you're looking for that sort of thing, I can't imagine you wanting to be anywhere else. I'm out of here. Go Utes.